Babylon, 539 BC. For centuries, the city had been one of the great centers of gravity in the ancient world. Sacred, wealthy, politically arrogant, and old enough to believe that history itself passed through its gates. Babylon was not merely a city. It was memory in brick and ritual. It was kingship wrapped in temple smoke, astronomy, tribute, and fear. Conquerors had come before with simpler intentions. Burn the walls, seize the treasure, deport the dangerous, break the gods of the defeated, and teach the survivors that resistance had no future. Cyrus of Persia entered with a different weapon. Not merely the sword, not merely the siege, he entered through the language of legitimacy. In Babylonian royal rhetoric, Cyrus did not present himself as a foreign vandal tearing civilization apart. He presented himself as a restorer of order, favored by Marduk, the great god of Babylon, correcting the failures of the city's last king. The famous Cyrus Cylinder, so often misread in the modern world as an ancient charter of human rights, is better understood as something colder, sharper, and perhaps more historically important, royal propaganda. A message carved in the idiom of the conquered. A conqueror speaking to Babylon in the voice Babylon expected kingship to use. And there, in that political act, the future of empire changed. The Persians did not invent conquest. The Near East had already seen conquest refined across generations. Assyria had turned terror into an imperial science. Babylon had inherited the prestige of temples and kings. Egypt carried divine monarchy and millennia of institutional memory. Lydia glittered with Anatolian wealth. Greek cities across the Aegean were restless laboratories of rivalry, trade, and civic pride. This was not an empty board awaiting Persian genius. It was a crowded war room of ancient ambitions. Yet from the rise of Cyrus in the mid-6th century BC to the fall of Persepolis before Alexander in 330 BC, the Achaemenid Empire built something unprecedented in scale and durability. A continental superpower capable of ruling across languages, gods, economies, aristocracies, and political traditions. It stretched authority across vast distances, then made that authority repeatable through governors, roads, couriers, tribute schedules, records, royal ideology, local elites, and disciplined intimidation. The central paradox was almost scandalous. Persia conquered strangers, then survived by allowing many of those strangers to remain recognizably themselves. Temples could stand. Local customs could continue. Native elites could keep influence. Subject peoples did not always need to become Persian. They needed to become obedient. That distinction is the key to the entire story, because Persian tolerance, where it appeared, was not simple benevolence. It was not modern liberalism projected backward into antiquity. It was conditional, strategic, revocable, a technology of rule. The empire learned that domination could become cheaper when dressed as restoration. That tribute flowed more smoothly when priests, merchants, and aristocrats became partners. That a king could command more effectively when subject peoples heard obedience in their own sacred vocabulary. This is Professor Adrian Lockwell for Archives of Humanity. In this investigation, the decisive scenes are not only battlefields. They are war rooms, royal courts, archives, road stations, treasuries, temples, and the grand chessboard on which the first true superpower discovered the terrifying art of governing difference. So the question at the heart of Persia's rise is not whether Cyrus was merciful, nor whether his empire was cruel. History rarely obeys categories that clean. The sharper question is this: was Persia merciful or simply intelligent? To answer it, the board must be set before Cyrus makes his move. Before Persia could rule strangers, the ancient Near East had to become a world where ruling strangers was the only path to supremacy. Before Persia could invent a new imperial formula, the older world had to expose the limits of its own. The Near East of the 7th and 6th centuries BC was not an empty stage awaiting a conqueror. It was a crowded chessboard of old kingdoms, trade corridors, tribute systems, priesthoods, military aristocracies, and cities with long memories of humiliation. In that world, conquest was not an exception. It was the normal language of power. Assyria had spoken that language with terrifying fluency. At its height, the Neo-Assyrian Empire created one of the most formidable engines of domination the ancient world had ever seen. Its kings treated fear not as an accident of war, but as an instrument of government. Rebellious cities could be annihilated. Populations could be deported across vast distances. Local rulers could be replaced, displayed, or erased from memory. Assyria did not merely defeat resistance. It turned punishment into political theater. The message was simple: obedience was cheaper than survival. For a time, the method worked. Terror moved tribute. Terror opened gates. Terror made rival kings calculate the price of defiance before raising a sword. But terror carried a hidden administrative cost. Every uprooted people preserved a grievance. Every humiliated elite waited for a weaker king. Every garrison consumed resources. Every conquered province required more intimidation to keep the last act of intimidation from failing. By the late 7th century BC, Assyria collapsed under the combined weight of enemies, rebellion, and exhaustion. Its fall left more than ruins. It left a lesson. Fear can seize an empire quickly, but fear alone rarely makes that empire durable. Babylon inherited the center of gravity with a different kind of authority. Under Nebuchadnezzar II in the 6th century BC, Babylon represented prestige, urban power, and Mesopotamian legitimacy. Its temples, scribal archives, priesthoods, and royal traditions gave it an aura that brute conquest could not easily manufacture. Babylon was more than a city. It was a political language older than many dynasties. To rule Babylon was to claim participation in a sacred order of kingship, gods, omens, and cosmic stability. To the west, Lydia under Croesus commanded another force, wealth. In western Anatolia, where inland routes met the Aegean world, Lydia stood near the hinge between Asia and the Greek cities. Its resources, gold, coinage traditions, and commercial position made it dangerous in a different way. Lydia could finance armies, influence allies, and project power into the restless political world of the eastern Mediterranean. To the south, Egypt remained ancient even to the ancients. Its grain, Nile economy, temples, priesthoods, and pharaonic ideology gave it a depth of legitimacy that foreign rulers could not simply replace. Egypt was not merely territory. It was sacred monarchy with a river, an archive, and a memory. Any empire that reached for Egypt was not only pursuing wealth. It was challenging one of humanity's oldest systems of political meaning. And on the Iranian plateau, Median power formed the regional framework from which the Persians first emerged. The Persians were an Iranian-speaking people rooted in southwestern Iran, not yet masters of continents, but entangled with, and perhaps subordinate to, Median authority. This matters. Persia did not rise from a vacuum. It rose from within an existing world of imperial experiments, watching how great powers commanded, failed, negotiated, punished, and survived. The strategic dilemma was severe. Conquest itself was ancient. Kings had sacked cities and claimed universal rule long before Cyrus. The revolutionary question was not how to defeat a civilization. The question was how to keep it functioning after defeat. An empire that tried to make Babylonians stop being Babylonian, Egyptians stop being Egyptian, Lydians stop being Lydian, and priests abandon the gods that gave their communities meaning would waste its strength fighting the identity of its own subjects. Persia's future genius would be to recognize that defeated elites did not always need to be destroyed. They could be absorbed, honored, watched, and used. Local institutions could survive, so long as tribute arrived, order held, and loyalty flowed upward to the king. Assyria terrified, Babylon inherited, Lydia financed, Egypt sanctified, Persia would integrate. But integration required more than kindness. It required calculation. It required a ruler who understood that legitimacy could be sharper than iron, and that the most efficient empire is often the one that teaches conquered peoples to obey in their own political language. The chessboard was ready for Cyrus. Into this crowded world of old kingdoms, priestly estates, trade routes, and dangerous memories stepped Cyrus II of Persia, a ruler whose early career remains partly historical record and partly royal shadow. The sources are uneven. Herodotus offers drama, dreams, betrayals, reversals, and the architecture of legend. Later traditions add moral polish. But behind the fog stands a hard political fact. Around 550 BC, Cyrus broke Median dominance and turned a regional Iranian power into the nucleus of a continental empire. The significance was not simply that Cyrus won. Many kings won battles. Many dynasties replaced other dynasties. Cyrus's deeper achievement was that conquest did not automatically become erasure. The Medes were not annihilated as a political people. Their nobles, military experience, and prestige were absorbed into the emerging Persian order. In that decision, the future empire revealed its first instinct. Defeated power could be redirected rather than destroyed. Loyalty would be reassigned upward, toward the Persian king, while familiar structures remained useful beneath him. Then came Lydia, the rich monarchy of western Anatolia under Croesus, a king whose name became a proverb for wealth. Around 547 or 546 BC, Cyrus defeated him and absorbed Lydia's treasuries, roads, strategic position, and access to the Aegean world. This was a turning point. Persia now touched the Mediterranean system. It inherited not only gold and fortresses, but merchants, coinage traditions, coastal cities, Greek political rivalries, and the restless intelligence of the Ionian frontier. The empire was no longer merely a power of the Iranian plateau or the Mesopotamian horizon. It had entered the volatile edge where Asia met the Greek Sea. Here again, Cyrus's genius was not victory alone. Victory is an event. Empire is a habit. The army could break a kingdom in weeks. Ruling its people required years of repetition, incentives, threats, honors, and rituals. Local authorities could survive. Temples could function. Languages could continue. But survival came with conditions: tribute, obedience, and public acceptance of Persian sovereignty. This was not modern tolerance. It was conditional autonomy. And it was powerful because it understood one of the central laws of rule. Domination becomes cheaper when it speaks in familiar symbols. The supreme demonstration came in 539 BC with Babylon. To conquer Babylon was to seize one of the sacred capitals of the ancient Near East. A city of kingship, priesthood, astronomy, law, scholarship, and imperial memory. A cruder conqueror might have celebrated rupture. Cyrus announced restoration. In Babylonian royal language, preserved most famously in the Cyrus Cylinder, he presented himself not as a foreign vandal, but as the favored instrument of Marduk, Babylon's great god, chosen to correct disorder and restore proper worship. The Cyrus Cylinder must not be mistaken for a modern charter of human rights. It is royal propaganda in a Babylonian idiom. But propaganda is never useless to the historian. It reveals the battlefield a ruler considered decisive. Cyrus fought for legitimacy inside Babylon's own imagination. Temples and cults could be restored where restoration served order. Displaced communities could be supported in returning to ancestral religious centers. Jewish exiles remembered Cyrus favorably in texts such as Isaiah and Ezra, and that memory fits a broader imperial pattern. Restoration could be mercy, but it was also policy. This was the Achaemenid breakthrough. Cyrus did not need Babylonians to become Persians. He did not need Lydians to forget Lydia, or Judeans to forget Jerusalem. He needed each community to discover, within its own sacred and political vocabulary, a reason to obey the King of Kings. The Achaemenid formula was not assimilation, but obedience through recognition. That formula was morally ambiguous because it could be genuinely less destructive than the alternatives and still remain unmistakably imperial. Clemency and calculation were not enemies. They were partners. Generosity reduced the cost of occupation. Local elites became instruments of control. Foreign gods, when properly honored, could be made to bless Persian rule. Yet this founding charisma carried a hidden danger. A system built on negotiated legitimacy must constantly perform legitimacy. Governors must not plunder too openly. Kings must appear victorious, chosen, and just. Local privileges must be preserved without allowing provinces to harden into independent kingdoms. Cyrus created the empire's magnetic center. His successors would inherit the harsher task, turning charisma into machinery. Cyrus had made expansion look almost providential. Cambyses II, succeeding him in 530 BC, revealed the harsher truth beneath the miracle. An empire is never inherited as a completed monument. It is inherited as a demand. It must be fed with tribute, defended with authority, and renewed with victories convincing enough to silence rivals at court and doubts in the provinces. This is one of the cruel laws of imperial power. A founder may conquer through charisma and strategic brilliance, but a successor must prove that the system can survive the founder's death. Persian nobles expected reward. Subject elites measured the new king for weakness. Frontier peoples watched the seams. When legitimacy has been built on conquest, stillness begins to look like decline. And beyond the southwestern horizon stood the prize no great king of Western Asia could ignore: Egypt. Egypt was not merely territory. It was grain, Nile wealth, Mediterranean access, African depth, and a monarchy whose sacred grammar reached into an antiquity so immense that Babylon itself could seem almost recent beside it. To control Egypt was to command one of the great food engines of the ancient world. It was also to claim partnership with temples, priesthoods, rituals, and royal symbols that had outlived foreign invasions, internal collapses, and centuries of dynastic change. Egypt was legitimacy with a river, a priesthood, and a memory. Strategically, Egypt mattered just as much as symbolically. It sat near the sea lanes where Greek, Phoenician, Cypriot, and Levantine interests collided. A hostile Egypt could shelter enemies and disturb the eastern Mediterranean. A Persian Egypt could become a granary, treasury, naval platform, and southern anchor of imperial order. In 525 BC, Cambyses moved against it. The decisive encounter came at Pelusium, the northeastern gateway into Egypt, where Persian forces defeated the army of Pharaoh Psamtik III. After Pelusium, Memphis fell. Egypt entered the Achaemenid imperial system. Later traditions, especially in Herodotus, turned Cambyses' Egyptian campaign into a theater of madness and sacrilege. Mockery of Egyptian religion, violence against priests, even the killing of the sacred Apis bull. But this portrait must be handled with discipline. Herodotus preserves invaluable material, yet he writes from a Greek world shaped by anti-Persian memory, and Egyptian priestly hostility may also have sharpened the accusations. Cambyses may well have committed brutality. Conquest was never a polite negotiation. But the image of a deranged vandal is too simple to explain the political evidence. Cambyses also did what conquerors of Egypt had to do if they wanted more than garrisons and tax lists. He adopted pharaonic titles. He interacted with Egyptian religious structures. Persian rule did not simply abolish Egyptian kingship. It attempted to inhabit it. This was the same imperial translation Cyrus had practiced in Babylon. But Egypt was older, more ritualized, and more psychologically volatile. A foreign king could seize the throne by force. To rule from it, he had to speak through Egyptian symbols. Here, the Persian formula met one of its first severe tests. Conditional respect could purchase cooperation, but it could not dissolve resentment. Local institutions could be preserved, but preservation also preserved local identity. The empire's genius was to rule difference. Its danger was that difference remembered itself. Then the greater crisis came not from the Nile, but from the Persian royal house. Cambyses died in 522 BC while returning from Egypt, and around his death erupted one of the most dangerous succession mysteries in ancient imperial history, the affair of Bardia, or Gaumeda. According to the official story later promoted by Darius, Cambyses had secretly killed his brother Bardia, and a magus named Gaumeda impersonated him to seize the throne. But that story is not a neutral report. It is the narrative of the victors, built to make seizure look like restoration and killing look like justice. Whether the man who claimed the throne was the real Bardia or an impostor, the danger was identical. The empire Cyrus had founded and Cambyses had expanded could fracture from its center. Not because Persia lacked armies, not because Egypt had ruined it, but because legitimacy, the invisible architecture holding millions of strangers together, had suddenly become uncertain. And into that uncertainty stepped Darius, a man who would not merely take power, but carve his version of power into the mountain itself. The empire did not pass from Cambyses into peaceful inheritance. In 522 BC, the Achaemenid world confronted the question that can destroy a monarchy faster than any foreign army. Who is the king, and who has the authority to make that claim sacred? Darius, later remembered as Darius the Great, claimed that the throne had been seized by Gaumeda, a Magian impostor pretending to be Bardia, the brother of Cambyses. Darius and a small circle of Persian nobles killed him. That was the official story. It may preserve real events. It may also preserve the victorious version of a palace coup. The sources do not permit easy certainty. But Darius understood the deeper battlefield immediately. Removing a rival body was not enough. The rival's story also had to be executed. So Darius carved his legitimacy into a mountain. The Behistun inscription, cut high into a cliff in western Iran, was more than a royal monument. It was an imperial press release in stone, a courtroom where only the king could speak, and a theological argument turned into political architecture. Written in Old Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian, it announced Darius as the rightful ruler under Ahura Mazda, branded his enemies as liars, and transformed civil war into a struggle between truth and disorder. Rebellion became falsehood. Victory became divine confirmation. The empire, nearly broken at the center, was being reassembled through language, image, and punishment. The fractures were not imaginary. Babylon, Elam, Media, Persia itself, and other regions tested whether this new king was sovereign or merely fortunate. Darius spent the beginning of his reign reconquering the empire he claimed to inherit. Each revolt suppressed became part of his foundation myth. Each rebel defeated proved the same argument. Persia was no longer only the achievement of Cyrus. It was becoming a system capable of surviving crisis. That system was Darius's true invention. From 522 to 486 BC, he turned conquest into procedure. Satrapies gave the empire provincial structure, governors, tribute obligations, military duties, local elites, and channels of accountability. Yet every satrap was both a solution and a danger. A governor who understood a province could collect revenue, manage nobles, and keep order. That same knowledge could also make him a rival king. So Darius layered authority against itself. Royal secretaries watched records. Treasurers watched wealth. Military commanders balanced governors. Inspectors moved between court and province. Later tradition remembered the king's eyes and ears, a phrase that captures the psychology of the system even where the evidence demands caution. Persia governed through delegation, but delegation was never allowed to become trust without surveillance. This was not a modern centralized state. Persian power remained layered, negotiated, and dependent on local priests, dynasts, scribes, aristocrats, and customs. But Darius made negotiation auditable. Tribute could be assessed. Orders could be recorded. Governors could be compared against reports. Loyalty could be rewarded, measured, and, when necessary, destroyed. Roads moved orders. Coins moved value. Scribes moved memory. Spies moved fear. The royal road, famously described by Herodotus, though its exact details require caution, became the great symbol of strategic distance compressed. From Sardis in western Anatolia toward Susa and the imperial heartlands, relay stations and couriers allowed royal information to move with astonishing speed for the age. In an empire of mountains, deserts, rivers, and languages, speed was not convenience. Speed was sovereignty. Language itself became machinery. Aramaic served as a practical administrative medium across vast territories, while Elamite, Akkadian, Old Persian, and other systems continued in royal, regional, and ceremonial use. The Persepolis fortification tablets reveal an empire of rations, labor groups, seals, officials, journeys, permissions, and accounts. Bureaucracy was not dull parchment work. It was organized coercion and organized trust, written into clay. Darius also projected authority into exchange through the gold daric and silver siglos, without imposing perfect monetary uniformity everywhere. A royal coin was a miniature doctrine of power. The king's order could be weighed in the hand. And at Persepolis, begun under Darius around 518 BC, the empire staged itself. Delegations appeared in ordered procession, distinct yet subordinated, diverse yet arranged around the throne. The message was severe. Difference could remain visible, but it had to move in formation. Cyrus had made empire charismatic. Darius made it repeatable. He turned legitimacy into inscription, distance into roads, obligation into accounts, wealth into coinage, and suspicion into administration. But a machine this powerful could not remain still. Once Persia learned to govern distance, it would begin testing the edges of the world, toward the Indus, across the northern steppes, and finally against the restless Greek frontier. The Persian imperial machine did not run on roads, coins, inscriptions, and couriers alone. It ran on people. Ambitious people, frightened people, rewarded people, watched people. Darius could divide the realm into satrapies, assign tribute, appoint officials, and carve royal truth into the cliffs of Behistun. But every command still passed through human hands, and every human hand could delay, distort, enrich itself, or rebel. This was the central danger of Achaemenid rule. The empire needed powerful governors because distance made direct rule impossible. Yet the moment a governor became powerful enough to govern effectively, he became powerful enough to imagine a future in which the province no longer needed the king. The satrap was therefore both Persia's solution and Persia's nightmare. He collected tribute, organized labor, guarded roads, negotiated with local elites, and often coordinated military resources. He possessed what the distant court lacked: regional knowledge, personal networks, familiarity with local customs, and the authority to act before an order could travel from Susa or Persepolis. In Egypt, Anatolia, Syria, Bactria, and beyond, men like this made empire practical. But practicality always casts a political shadow. A satrap surrounded by soldiers, treasuries, aristocrats, scribes, and local loyalties could become not merely an administrator, but a rival center of gravity. Every satrap was an asset. Every asset was a possible rebellion. So Persian rule developed around a deliberate tension: delegation without innocence. The great king empowered provincial authorities, then placed them inside a web of counterweights. Royal secretaries could report independently. Treasurers tracked revenue. Military command could be separated from civil authority. Inspectors could arrive with the authority of the throne. Later Greek authors, including Herodotus and Xenophon, describe royal surveillance through their own literary and political filters, most famously in the tradition of the king's eyes and ears. The phrase should not be mistaken for a modern intelligence agency with a preserved organizational chart. But as a symbol, it captures a real imperial anxiety. The king had to see what distance tried to conceal, because in an empire of this scale, ignorance was not a flaw. It was treason's oxygen. Was tribute being skimmed before it reached the treasury? Were troops loyal to the crown, or to the governor who paid them? Were priesthoods stabilizing the province, or quietly nursing resentment? Were frontier peoples trading, raiding, or preparing to vanish beyond imperial punishment? Persia understood that conquest created information problems. The larger the empire became, the more reality had to be translated into reports, seals, lists, rations, letters, and rumors. This is why the Persepolis administrative evidence is so revealing. The fortification tablets do not offer the drama of heroic speeches. They offer something more intimate to power. Rations issued, labor groups moved, officials named, women workers recorded, travelers supplied, commodities tracked. They reveal an empire that did not merely command in thunder. Counted. It documented. It watched movement through the bloodstream of administration. Yet surveillance alone could not hold such a world together. Fear is powerful, but fear is expensive when used by itself. Persia's deeper method was co-option, making local greatness serve imperial greatness. Aristocrats, priests, dynasts, scribes, and military specialists were often retained or integrated rather than erased. A noble family might keep status if it kept order. A priesthood might keep privileges if it sanctified stability. A city might preserve its customs if it paid tribute and obeyed the king's peace. This was not benevolence in a modern moral sense. It was political economy. Destroy every local elite, and the empire must govern every village directly. Recruit those elites, and old hierarchies become Persian instruments. The court strengthened these bonds through honors, titles, gifts, marriage ties, and proximity to royal prestige. Sons of important families could be drawn toward court education or kept as honored hostages, living guarantees that loyalty had flesh and blood attached to it. Hostage politics did not always look like crude imprisonment. Often it was velvet coercion. A provincial prince raised near imperial splendor, trained in the language of hierarchy, rewarded by obedience, and reminded that rebellion would endanger both ambition and family. This was the human architecture of rule. Subjects received continuity. Elites received status. Satraps received authority. The king received tribute and obedience. But beneath the bargain lay permanent suspicion, because every participant had reasons to cooperate and reasons to betray. Persia had discovered a severe law of political scale. Diversity can be governed only when information moves faster than rebellion, and loyalty becomes more profitable than defiance. It was an achievement of extraordinary sophistication and extraordinary fragility. The system worked best where local elites accepted its bargain. But at the edges of empire, not every society could be folded neatly into the imperial design. Some enemies refused cities. Some refused kings. Some refused the very script of obedience. And as Persian power pressed toward the steppes, the Indus, and the restless Greek cities of the Aegean, the machinery of control began to meet frontiers that did not behave like provinces. A system built to manage difference eventually discovers that management is never enough. Roads, tribute schedules, spies, garrisons, and satraps do not simply hold an empire together. They create momentum. Once the machinery works, it begins to ask the king a dangerous question. Where does order end, and where must it expand next? Under Darius, Persia's frontiers became tests of imperial intelligence. To the east, the empire pressed toward the Indus region, absorbing lands of river systems, dense populations, and extraordinary taxable wealth. This was not expansion for glory alone. In the Achaemenid imagination, distant provinces were revenue, manpower, prestige, and proof that royal authority stretched toward the edges of the inhabited world. Later Greek writers described India as one of the richest tributary zones of the empire. Even allowing for exaggeration, the strategic meaning remains clear: wealth at the edge strengthened power at the center. But every frontier taught a different lesson. In the east, rivers and tribute could be folded into the imperial ledger. On the northern steppe, the ledger began to fail. Around 513 BC, Darius launched his famous campaign against the Scythians, moving beyond the Danube into the world of mounted nomads. Here, Persia confronted an enemy that refused to behave like a kingdom. The Scythians offered no Babylon to enter, no Sardis to seize, no priesthood to reassure, no palace treasury to capture and rename as imperial property. They possessed mobility, distance, and the most maddening weapon against an empire built on decisive submission: refusal. Persia could bridge rivers, assemble armies, and project royal authority across astonishing distances. The Scythians could dissolve into space. They could withdraw, devastate supplies, harass movement, and deny the battle that imperial armies needed in order to turn force into victory. This was strategy as absence. Persian power remained enormous, but on the steppe, mass became hunger, and hunger became vulnerability. The campaign did not break Darius, but it exposed a principle that would echo across centuries. Power designed to conquer cities struggles against peoples who turn geography itself into a fortress. The western frontier presented an even stranger problem. Along the coast of Asia Minor stood the Greek cities of Ionia. Wealthy, maritime, competitive, commercially connected, and politically restless. They were not great empires, but they were not passive subjects either. Many lived under local tyrants backed or tolerated by Persian authority, which made perfect administrative sense. A tyrant could collect tribute. A tyrant could answer to a satrap. A tyrant could turn a turbulent city into something the imperial center could understand. But Greek political culture did not remain inside the file. Factional rivalries, aristocratic resentments, popular anger, and memories of civic autonomy made Ionia a frontier of legitimacy, not merely territory. Persia did not initially see mainland Greece as an existential rival. Athens and Eretria were minor powers beside Babylon, Egypt, Lydia, or the Industry. To the great king, the Greek world was a noisy edge of empire, a maritime disturbance to be contained. That containment failed in 499 BC, when the Ionian revolt erupted. Its causes were tangled. Resentment against tyrants, local grievances, elite ambition, economic pressure, and the contagious possibility that Persian authority could be challenged. This was not a simple morality play of freedom against tyranny. It was ancient politics in its raw form. Cities gambling with survival, leaders converting frustration into rebellion, and an empire discovering that delegated control could produce delegated hatred. Then the fire crossed the border. Athens and Eretria sent support. In 498 BC, Ionian and Athenian forces struck Sardis, one of Persia's great western administrative centers, and burned parts of the city. The material damage mattered. The symbolism mattered more. Sardis was not merely a place. It was imperial credibility in stone, archive, and treasury. A city beyond the frontier had helped ignite the king's property. Darius could not treat this as a local inconvenience. In a multi-ethnic empire, rebellion is never only rebellion. It is an invitation. If one province can revolt with foreign help and survive, others begin to calculate. If a distant city can burn a royal center without consequence, fear begins to decay. The revolt was eventually crushed. At the Battle of Lade in 494 BC, Persian naval power broke the Ionian cause, and imperial retaliation restored control. But victory did not erase the lesson. It sharpened it. The western frontier had revealed a new danger. Small states outside the empire could destabilize peoples inside it. From that moment, Greece changed in the Persian mind. Not yet the great rival of legend. Not yet the stage of destiny. But a border problem that had become a strategic argument. Athens and Eretria had crossed an invisible line at Sardis. Darius now had both a provocation and a doctrine. Punish the meddlers, secure the Aegean, and make rebellion expensive. By 490 BC, Darius had transformed a frontier disturbance into an imperial test. Athens and Eretria had helped the Ionian rebels burn Sardis in 498 BC, and Sardis was not an ordinary target. It was a royal hinge in western Anatolia, a place where Persian authority touched the Aegean world. If two small cities could strike that hinge, assist rebellion, and then retreat into the shelter of the sea without consequence, the empire would teach its own subjects a disastrous lesson. The great king did not need hatred. He needed precedent. The expedition across the Aegean was therefore not the beginning of a total war against Greece. It was a punitive operation, designed to restore the psychology of obedience. Eretria came first. The city was besieged, betrayed according to later tradition, and punished. Its population was deported into the imperial system, absorbed by the same machinery that had moved peoples, tribute, and authority across continents. This was imperial communication in its harshest form. Fear made visible, punishment turned into policy. Then the Persian force landed at Marathon, northeast of Athens. Tradition places Hippias with them, the exiled former tyrant of Athens, a human instrument of Persian strategy. His presence revealed the deeper logic of the campaign. Persia did not always need to govern by direct occupation. It could restore clients, support compliant elites, and make local politics serve imperial order. The objective was clean. Punish Athens, perhaps reinstall a friendly regime, force submission, and prove that the great king's memory was longer than the Aegean was wide. Inside Athens, the crisis was political before it was military. The enemy stood on the plain, but the greater terror was uncertainty inside the city itself. Democracy was young. Factional wounds were fresh. Tyranny was not some distant ancestral nightmare. It was a recent and plausible return. A plea for Spartan assistance had been sent, but according to Herodotus, Spartan movement was delayed by religious or calendrical obligations. Athens entered the most dangerous interval in politics. Allies existed in theory, but action was required before they arrived. Miltiades became decisive not as a flawless savior, but as a commander who understood timing. Delay could invite betrayal. Waiting could allow Persian cavalry, naval maneuver, and internal conspiracy to combine into a victory without a decisive battle. The Athenians, joined by their Plataean allies, chose the path of maximum risk. They attacked. Marathon matters because the Athenians refused the role the empire had assigned them. Persian punitive campaigns were meant to make local powers calculate rationally and submit. But on that plane, a small community refused to behave like a province awaiting discipline. The Athenian line advanced, apparently accepting weakness in the center while strengthening the wings. In the violent compression that followed, Greek heavy infantry found a narrow tactical world where armor, cohesion, and momentum mattered more than the abstract vastness of the Achaemenid Empire. The result was a Persian defeat, but not a Persian catastrophe. That distinction is essential. Persia did not collapse. Its treasuries remained immense. Its provinces remained obedient enough. Its armies could be rebuilt. Darius remained the most formidable monarch of the age. Marathon did not end Persian power. It wounded something less visible. Inevitability. For Athens, survival became political capital. The city could now tell itself that the great king could be resisted. That memory would become intoxicating, dangerous, and strategically useful. For Persia, the lesson was colder. A limited punishment expedition had produced the opposite of its intended message. Instead of manufacturing fear, it created prestige for defiance. This is the paradox of imperial signaling. When punishment succeeds, it disciplines the frontier. When it fails, even locally, it can become propaganda for the punished. Marathon was not the simple rescue of West from East, as later ages would flatter themselves by claiming. It was a crack in perception, a moment when imperial scale failed to become decisive force at the point of contact. Darius understood that the account remained open. The frontier had not been pacified. It had been emboldened. But before he could return on a larger scale, death intervened. The problem passed to Xerxes not merely as a plan for revenge, but as a crisis of imperial credibility. Darius did not live to answer Marathon. In 486 BC, the throne passed to Xerxes' I, and with it came more than a crown. It came with an unfinished imperial argument. Athens had survived punishment. Eretria had fallen, but the larger signal had failed. In the politics of empire, a failed warning is often more dangerous than no warning at all, because every satrap, every subject city, and every rival beyond the frontier begins to ask the same corrosive question. Where does the king's reach end? But Xerxes did not turn west immediately. First came the ancient burden of succession, proving that the center still held. Egypt rebelled. Babylonian unrest flared. From a distance, Persia looked like a single colossus. From the royal court, it was a map of pressure points, loyalties, temples, treasuries, garrisons, and ambitious men waiting to see whether a new king could command the old machinery. Before Greece could be disciplined, the empire had to remind its own provinces that succession was not permission. Xerxes suppressed revolt, restored obedience, and then prepared the most spectacular mobilization the Eastern Mediterranean had ever seen. The invasion of 480 BC was not merely revenge for Marathon. Revenge was the public language of kings because it was simple, emotional, and memorable. The deeper logic was deterrence, dynastic prestige, frontier security, and inherited imperial momentum. Persia could not allow small powers beyond the Aegean to assist rebellion in Asia Minor and then retreat behind distance. If Athens could help burn Sardis in 498 BC and later survive Persian punishment, the lesson to the frontier would be poisonous. Xerxes had to make rebellion expensive not only for rebels, but for anyone tempted to become their patron. So Persia did what Persia did best. It turned geography into an administrative problem. The Hellespont was bridged, transforming water into road. The canal at Athos was cut, both a monument to royal will and a practical answer to earlier naval disaster near that dangerous coast. Supply points were prepared. Routes were coordinated. Subject peoples were compelled into motion. Army and fleet had to advance as one organism. Land power moving through Thrace and Macedonia, naval power shadowing the coast, guarding communications, carrying provisions, and pressing Greek cities toward submission. This was the empire's diversity made visible. Persians and Medes stood near the core, but around them moved Egyptians, Phoenicians, Ionians, Babylonians, Anatolians, and many others, each with different languages, skills, loyalties, and memories of conquest. To Greek observers, it could appear as if the world itself were marching under one king. To Persian command, it was both a miracle of coordination and a nightmare of friction. The very diversity that made the empire vast also made it delicate. Scale was power, but scale still had to be translated into timing, obedience, supply, and trust. Across the Aegean, Greek unity was not inevitable. It was fragile, improvised, and constantly threatened by fear. Some cities submitted to Persia, a choice the Greeks called Medism. Others hesitated, Sparta possessed military prestige, but moved within its own political and religious rhythms. Athens, under the pressure of Themistocles' vision, had made a revolutionary gamble to become a naval power. Silver from Laurion, civic persuasion, and strategic fear had been converted into triremes. The defense of Athens was no longer only stone walls. It was cedar, oars, trained crews, and a dangerous idea. A city might survive even if its buildings were lost. When the Persian machine reached Greece in 480 BC, Thermopylae and Artemisium became paired calculations, not isolated heroic tableaus. Thermopylae was the narrow gate on land, chosen to slow the imperial army and reduce the value of numbers. Artemisium was its naval counterpart, where the Greek fleet tried to blunt Persian sea power while the land defense held. These were delaying and attritional actions in a war where delay itself could become strategy. Then came Athens' severest decision. The city would be evacuated. Its temples, homes, and public spaces could be sacrificed if the fleet remained alive. This was not despair. It was strategic realism at its coldest. Xerxes could burn the empty shell of Athens and appear triumphant, yet the decisive instrument of Greek resistance would still be afloat. The Persian king had brought bridges, roads, fleets, tribute, fear, negotiation, and the obedience of continents to the edge of victory. Now the problem narrowed with brutal elegance. Could imperial mass become decisive force at the exact point where geography, command, and human nerve would permit it? The sea was about to become the courtroom of empire. After Thermopylae, the Persian campaign seemed to have recovered its momentum. The pass had fallen. Central Greece lay exposed. The Spartan stand had bought time, not victory. Persian power moved south, and Athens, evacuated by a decision as ruthless as it was strategically brilliant, was taken and burned in 480 BC. For Xerxes, the symbolism mattered. The city that had helped ignite the Ionian revolt had been punished. The imperial message appeared restored. Rebellion invited destruction, royal power crossed seas, and the great king could reach the offender even across the Aegean. But strategy is never satisfied by symbolism alone. The burning of Athens answered vengeance. It did not answer control. Persia still needed command of the sea. Without naval dominance, the vast land army in Greece became a weapon with a weakening grip, formidable in appearance, but increasingly difficult to supply, coordinate, and protect. The fleet was not an accessory to the invasion. It was the campaign's bloodstream. It carried provisions, guarded communications, supported movement, and threatened encirclement. The Greek coalition understood the inverse truth. If Persian numbers could be forced into confined water, if imperial mass could be compressed inside a narrow maritime corridor, then scale itself might become a liability. This was the brutal logic of Salamis. The smaller force did not need to destroy Persia's empire. It needed to make Persia's advantages unusable. Here Themistocles emerges not as a marble patriot, but as one of the most dangerous strategic minds of the ancient world. He had pushed Athens toward the sea, toward triremes, toward the radical idea that a city could lose its buildings and still survive if its fleet remained intact. At Salamis, he fought with ships, geography, coalition anxiety, and political manipulation. The Greek allies were divided. Some wanted to retreat toward the Peloponnese. Themistocles needed battle before fear dissolved the coalition. Ancient traditions describe deception. Messages sent to Xerxes, claims of Greek disunity, and the suggestion that the fleet might escape. The details remain contested, as they often do when later memory reshapes strategy into legend. But the strategic result is clear. The Persian fleet was drawn into the Straits of Salamis, where numbers could no longer unfold into full power. There, the empire met the geometry of decision. Phoenician, Egyptian, Ionian, Cypriot, and other subject contingents served within the Persian naval machine. In open water, that diversity could be strength. Many peoples, many skills, one imperial purpose. In a cramped channel, it became command friction. Different languages, loyalties, tactical habits, and levels of enthusiasm had to operate under extreme pressure. Greek triremes, fighting close to home and under existential urgency, struck in waters that rewarded cohesion over size. Persian ships crowded, collided, and struggled to convert superiority into effect. According to the dramatic tradition, Xerxes watched from the shore. Whether every detail is theatrical or not, the image captures the deeper truth. A ruler of a vast system seeing power present, power visible, power immense, and yet unable to arrive in the right shape at the decisive point. Salamis was a psychological detonation. It did not annihilate Persia. It did not erase imperial wealth, manpower, or administrative depth. But it broke the campaign's central assumption, that overwhelming mobilization could force Greek submission on Persian terms. Xerxes' withdrawal afterward was not simple cowardice. It was rational imperial risk management. Revolts could ignite elsewhere. Supply lines could deteriorate. The Hellespont crossing could become a trap. A king of kings had to preserve the empire, not gamble the imperial core on a damaged western expedition. So Xerxes departed, leaving Mardonius with a powerful army to continue the war. In 479 BC, at Plataea, the unresolved question returned on land. After maneuvers, confusion, shifting positions, and the death of Mardonius, Persian hopes for the decisive conquest of mainland Greece collapsed. Around the same time, at Mycale, Greek forces struck Persian power in the eastern Aegean. The offensive vision had failed. Discipline the Greek world, secure the frontier, and make rebellion permanently expensive. Yet triumphalism misses the harsher lesson. Persia did not fall at Salamis, Plataea, or Mycale. It remained enormous, wealthy, and dangerous. The Western campaign failed not because Persia lacked power, but because power arrived in the wrong shape. Too large for the strait, too dependent on naval control, too burdened by distance, and too confident that imperial scale could master political terrain. The empire survived the humiliation, and that survival raises the deeper question that follows. How could a state lose so dramatically at the edge of its world, and still remain the greatest imperial machine of its age? The failure in mainland Greece did not break Persia. That is one of the great distortions created by the surviving Greek memory of the wars. Because Salamis and Plataea became stories of deliverance, later imagination often treats Persia as though it staggered back into Asia mortally wounded. It did not. After 479 BC, the Achaemenid Empire remained the dominant power of Western Asia. Immense, wealthy, administratively experienced, and still able to shape the fate of peoples far beyond its royal heartlands. Persia had lost a campaign. It had not lost the imperial system. In fact, the empire soon discovered that Greece could be managed more cheaply through rivalry than through occupation. If hoplites and triremes made direct conquest costly, Greek disunity could be turned into a strategic resource. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and the smaller polis were not a single moral community moving in harmony. They were jealous political organisms, armed with pride, old injuries, commercial ambitions, and fear of one another. Persian gold could travel where Persian armies no longer needed to march. Subsidies, envoys, treaties, and selective support became instruments of policy. The empire that failed to crush Greece by force learned to influence Greece by division. During and after the Peloponnesian War, Persian satraps in western Anatolia played Greek powers against each other with disciplined patience. Athens had once helped burn Sardis. Now Greek fleets and factions increasingly depended on Persian money. The irony is severe. The Greek world celebrated resistance to the great king, yet its own civil wars repeatedly invited the great king back as banker, broker, and judge. The clearest symbol came with the King's Peace of 387 or 386 BC, associated with Artaxerxes II. In that settlement, Persia effectively dictated the framework of Greek affairs. The Greek cities of Asia were recognized as belonging to the king, while the mainland city-states were to remain autonomous, at least in principle. This was not the behavior of a ruined empire. It was the diplomacy of a superpower that had learned a harder lesson. Sometimes the best way to rule a frontier is not to conquer it, but to make its divisions profitable. Yet resilience was not the same as security. Inside the empire, the old pressures continued to grind beneath the surface. Dynastic succession remained a recurring wound. Court intrigue could be as lethal as enemy cavalry. Satraps were indispensable because the empire was too vast to govern from one throne room. Yet every powerful governor was also a potential rival, a regional king in all but name if central authority weakened. Egypt repeatedly resisted Persian rule, reminding the court that ancient civilizations did not forget sovereignty simply because tribute had been imposed. Frontier regions demanded attention. Provincial elites had to be rewarded, watched, flattered, threatened, and replaced at the correct moment. The Achaemenid system survived because it was flexible, but every flexible system has a dangerous threshold where adaptation begins to resemble fracture. That danger appeared with brutal clarity in 401 BC. Cyrus the Younger, brother of Artaxerxes II, marched against the king with a mixed army that included thousands of Greek mercenaries. At Cunaxa, near Babylon, Cyrus was killed, and the rebellion collapsed. But the aftermath became almost as consequential as the battle. The Greek mercenaries, later made famous in Xenophon's Anabasis, found themselves deep inside imperial territory without their patron, without a secure command structure, and without an obvious road home. Their retreat to the Black Sea became a psychological revelation. Disciplined soldiers could cross Persian lands and survive. That did not mean Persia was hollow. Xenophon's account is a Greek literary and political text, not a neutral autopsy of empire. The 10,000 did not conquer Persia. They escaped it. But perceptions matter in history. A state may remain powerful while its enemies begin to imagine that its vastness is penetrable. The mental map had changed. By the 360s BC, the so-called satraps' revolt exposed further centrifugal pressures. Regional commanders, dynasts, and local interests tested the limits of royal control. These revolts did not destroy the empire, but they revealed the permanent paradox of Achaemenid rule. The king needed powerful men to govern distance, and those men needed only opportunity to behave like sovereigns. So the late empire should not be reduced to a simple drama of inevitable decline. It was resilient and vulnerable at once. A giant still standing, but with joints strained by distance, succession, and delegation. Beyond the Aegean, another transformation was gathering. Macedon under Philip II was forging political unity and military innovation from the violent chaos of the Greek world. Alexander would inherit that weapon, along with a dangerous strategic insight. Persia did not need to be occupied all at once. It could be shaken by striking the king, the treasuries, and the nerve centers of imperial legitimacy. Macedonian speed arrived like a political crisis on horseback. By the late 4th century BC, the Achaemenid Empire still possessed immense wealth, ancient prestige, fortified centers, experienced administrators, and provinces stretching across a world of languages and loyalties. But magnificence is not the same as agility. The old Persian machine could mobilize continents. Alexander forced it to respond at the tempo of a raiding storm. In 334 BC, at the Granicus River, Persian forces assembled by regional satraps tried to stop the Macedonian crossing into Asia. Their defeat was not yet the fall of the empire. It was something more dangerous in the beginning. A breach in expectation. Persia had long understood how to absorb rebellions, punish frontier disturbances, and outlast smaller enemies. Alexander presented a different problem. He did not nibble at the edges of empire. He drove toward its nerves, its treasuries, its symbols, and finally its king. Darius III inherited an empire of enormous resources, but resources only matter when they can be converted into coordinated action. Babylonian wealth, Egyptian instability, Anatolian satraps, Iranian nobles, Phoenician naval interests, Eastern aristocracies, Greek mercenaries, and court factions all belonged to the imperial world, but they did not move as one mind. Tribute could fill arsenals, but silver could not instantly manufacture trust. Governors could defend provinces, but provincial defense became fragile when the invader moved faster than imperial communication and suspicion could catch him. At Issus in 333 BC, Darius met Alexander in person, and the loss cut deeper than territory. Persian kingship was not merely a command office. It was the central symbol of order. The great king's presence was meant to steady the empire's imagination. When the battlefield collapsed and Darius withdrew, Alexander captured more than momentum. He captured narrative. The Macedonian could now appear not as a reckless invader, but as the man whom the King of Kings had failed to stop. Gaugamela in 331 BC transformed that narrative into catastrophe. Darius chose ground suitable for imperial strength, with space for cavalry and the projection of scale. Yet Alexander's army carried a different kind of advantage. Disciplined shock, tactical flexibility, and a commander willing to risk the center of history on a single opening. When the Persian line broke and Darius fled again, the Achaemenid dynasty still existed in a technical sense, but its political spell had cracked. Monarchies can survive defeat. They rarely survive repeated scenes of royal abandonment. And yet, Alexander did not destroy Persia's idea. He inherited it. His strategy was decapitation followed by appropriation. Defeat the king, seize the treasuries, occupy Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, claim legitimacy, and then keep the mechanisms that made rule possible. Satrapies remained useful. Persian nobles and administrators remained useful. Local institutions remained useful. Asia could not be governed as an enlarged Macedonian camp. It required roads, tribute channels, records, seals, storehouses, provincial expertise, court hierarchy, and men who understood how obedience traveled across distance. Persepolis, burned in 330 BC, became the great theatrical image of Achaemenid ruin. Whether revenge, drunken disaster, calculated spectacle, or some mixture of all three, the destruction of the ceremonial heart announced that a dynasty had been broken. The palace burned. The blueprint survived. Alexander's adoption of Persian court practices, royal ceremony, administrative habits, and political distance was not a decorative betrayal of Macedonia. It was a recognition of scale. His successors learned the same lesson. The Seleucids, Ptolemies, and other Hellenistic kingdoms ruled through provinces, court ritual, coinage, diplomacy, military colonies, and local elites. Later Rome would discover the same severe truth. Roads, governors, taxation, law, client rulers, and symbolic legitimacy were not accessories to power. They were power's skeleton. So Persia's fall was both collapse and transmission. A dynasty died. An operating system migrated. Alexander entered the imperial center as conqueror, but history's irony is sharper than heroic legend. The victor became a student of the empire he had broken. Conquest can kill a king faster than it can kill a method. Armies can burn capitals, but they cannot easily burn administrative memory. Persia's kings disappeared into the violence of 330 BC. Persia's idea endured, and that endurance leads toward the final problem: what it costs to rule difference at scale, and what happens when the machinery built to manage humanity begins to believe it has mastered it. And this is where the story becomes larger than Persia, larger than Alexander, and larger than the ruins of any palace. The Achaemenid Empire did not fall because its imperial idea was small. It fell because even the most sophisticated system of rule can be struck at the right moment, by the right enemy, through the right corridor of weakness. From the rise of Cyrus in the mid-6th century BC to Alexander's conquest by 330 BC, Persia created something more durable than a dynasty. It created repeatable power. That is why Persia deserves the title of the first superpower in the deepest historical sense. Not simply because it held vast territory from the Aegean world to Central Asia, from Egypt to the edges of India. Not simply because its treasuries were immense, its armies multinational, and its kings spoke in the language of cosmic order. Persia mattered because it built methods, portable methods, teachable methods, imitable methods, for ruling strangers across civilizational boundaries. Those methods rested on 4 great instruments: legitimacy, the ability to enter Babylon not merely as a conqueror with soldiers, but as a restorer speaking the language of Marduk, tradition, priesthood, and sacred order. Infrastructure, roads, couriers, storehouses, way stations, seals, tablets, and administrative routes that compressed distance and allowed royal authority to travel faster than rebellion could comfortably mature. Elite co-option, priests, aristocrats, dynasts, scribes, commanders, and local notables drawn into the imperial machine, rewarded for obedience, watched for ambition, and taught that their own status could survive inside Persian supremacy. And information, reports, archives, inspectors, messengers, provincial accounts, and the remembered shadow of the king's eyes and ears. For an empire of this scale, ignorance was not merely inconvenient. Ignorance was a mortal danger. Here lies the moral ambiguity at the center of the Persian achievement. Its tolerance was often real. Temples could be restored. Local laws could endure. Languages could continue. Communities could remain recognizably themselves. But this was not modern pluralism. It was not equality before an abstract constitution. It was conditional recognition under imperial command. Autonomy and surveillance were not contradictions. They were partners. Persia allowed difference to breathe, so long as difference paid tribute, honored the king, and did not become rebellion. That is the ancient problem that never left history. Every large political order must confront the same severe riddle. How can difference be governed without dissolving into fragmentation or hardening into suffocation? Too much coercion produces revolt. Too much looseness produces centrifugal collapse. Too much sameness destroys the societies being ruled. Too much difference can make common authority feel like fiction. The Achaemenids did not solve this problem forever. No civilization has, but they gave history one of its first great operating systems for managing it. Later empires changed the language, the gods, the uniforms, and the maps. Yet the grammar remained familiar. Roads and records, local elites and central suspicion, legitimacy and fear, spectacle and tax, mercy and calculation. So the deepest question is not whether Persia was enlightened or oppressive. It was both, depending on the province, the reign, the crisis, and the eye that judged it. The deeper question is whether power, when it learns to respect identity because identity can be governed, has discovered wisdom, or merely domination with better manners. Alexander burned Persepolis, but he did not burn the blueprint. His successors, and many who came after them, stepped into a world Persia had already taught them how to imagine. The first superpower did not merely rule land. It taught later empires how to rule difference. For the next investigation into the machinery of civilizations, select the documentary on the end screen now and keep the chain of history moving. In the comments, answer this directly. Was Persia's tolerance wisdom, strategy, or both? And subscribe to Archives of Humanity for rigorous cinematic histories of power, strategy, and the human condition.